you mentioned the idea of having room to make quality software. And that's something that we have been doing for 18 years now. Our focus has been making a good product and then hoping that it finds an audience, as opposed to finding an audience and just making a product that, barely suits their needs.
Welcome to Music Ed Tech Talk, a podcast exploring the topics of music, education, technology, and the intersections between them, with a special focus on the productive and creative process. I'm your host, Robby Burns. Joining the show today is Paul Kafasis. He's the CEO of Rogue Amoeba. They develop amazing audio software for the Mac, tons of apps, many of which I use to create practice resources, edit audio, and more recently to enhance the Zoom and Google Meet classes that I've been giving to my private and public school students. Their apps can do so many things. They're crazy flexible, crazy powerful, and if you're a music teacher with a Mac in your life, you should be using them. In the conversation, we talk about what Rogue Amoeba's apps do, amongst other things, and I comment specifically on how I'm using them in a music teaching environment. Hope you enjoy the conversation.
Honestly, the most difficult thing is I've done podcasts and failed to check to make sure that I had a working licensed version of my own software. And so I'll be 10 minutes in and suddenly the warning will pop up and I got to scramble to throw a key in there because I'm constantly testing it. So it's in all sorts of states of various disrepair, but I have tested this. I should be all set.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm curious what of your own software, because in the podcasting community, people who use Mac OS are typically enthusiastic about a lot of Rogue Amoeba software. I actually don't use any of it when I record a podcast. So are you using Audio Hijack right now?
I'm using Audio Hijack. I sometimes use Piezo. It depends on... Piezo's so easy if I'm just recording a mic, I can just throw the mic and hit the record button and I know I'm good to go. But right now I'm using Piezo because it's what I had open. I'm using Audio Hijack because it's what I had open.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I should do Piezo for that same purpose. A lot of people... I record into Logic, which people say is not a good idea, and it's never been a problem for me, but,
Until that one time when it is.
Right, exactly. No, but QuickTime has been recommended to me, and I don't know, for something I don't know what it is about the way that it looks when it's recording. I know it's doing the job. I don't trust it for some reason.
I mean, I'm not going to sit here and expound on the various reasons to use one over the other. All of these things generally work. You're pulling from a microphone, you're recording to a file. It's not rocket surgery, but it's something where for us, obviously, these are our tools, so I'm going to use our tools. But you were talking about the community at large. I mean, the big thing for especially Audio Hijack, but Piezo as well, is being able to record from something like Zoom or Skype, and then the person on the other end doesn't even need to record. So with Audio Hijack and with Piezo, you can just point it at Skype or Zoom or whichever VoIP app you're using, and it'll record your microphone and it'll record the other end, and it can even do it to separate files with Audio Hijack so that you don't have to have your guest necessarily doing the recording as well. Obviously, you get better quality if they are, but...
Yeah, maybe that's the appeal. So I guess because Zoom is typically just a backup to audio files and it's doing that automatically, I guess I just have ignored the possibility.
Well, and Zoom has gotten much bigger this year. Obviously, Skype certainly is still pretty big in terms of podcasting, at least. And Skype doesn't have any recording built in, and FaceTime doesn't have any recording built in. So that's where we see a lot of people just say, "Yep, I'm going to record it. I will take care of everything, and my guest can, all they have to do is talk."
Right. Yeah. Now, for two people who are fairly comfortable recording a podcast on their own ends of a conversation, I've always wondered why I don't hear more about FaceTime in these kinds of conversations. I actually have used it just to establish the connection, and then I've just recorded. We've both recorded our end of the call into a digital audio workstation. That's been fine. I guess it's just Skype has just got a long-lasting history of people don't want to change their workflow.
Yeah, and well, obviously with FaceTime you need two people on a Mac or an iOS device of some sort, so that's certainly part of it, that if your guests are not all Mac users or Apple users, then you're going to need to use some other platform. And I think ideally you're just using, so you mentioned your school district, what do you guys use there?
Google Meet. Okay,
right, so now you have to learn Meet, you have to learn Zoom. Do you also want to learn FaceTime as well? And do you also want to learn Skype as well? I mean, the more platforms you have, the more ways that you can screw things up, I think.
I think that's true, totally true. For me, I have a lot of different areas and domains of life that I'm juggling, and having the variety of tools can sometimes as long as it's not creating problems for the people on the other end who don't need to be fussing with the tool, I feel pretty good about, like I teach some private lessons where I teach percussion, and Zoom has been my platform of choice. And I was a long holdout on Zoom, but now that I have been using it for these private lessons, which make up a substantial, I don't know, like at least 16 hours of my week, I'm pretty pleased I'm pretty pleased with what it is able to do. The features are good. It's been reliable. I don't know why. I mean, I guess like there was, it had some negative news early in its earlier rise to popularity, but I've sort of warmed up to it.
It works. I mean, I'm on. I don't do video calls daily, but I'm on Zoom, Google Meet, Skype, Cisco WebEx. I have to use with one group, so I'm used to all these platforms. But it's been interesting to see the rise of all of them this year, really.
Yeah, it makes me super curious, like what. If anyone, what will continue to be improved upon. Right. I know Google Meet is sort of. I think that they see Zoom as enough of a threat that they have really kind of scrambled to add the most popular, or at least things that in education people say, are useful. Like there's like a lot of conversation about the equity of, forcing a child to reveal their home life circumstances. So,
sure.
Google has like jumped on this custom background thing and the breakout rooms and a lot of that stuff. And, I want to be optimistic about that because, working from home has kind of forced me to do, like we've always used the Google stuff in my district. I've tried to avoid it in favor of more native feeling software. But now that I'm just like sitting at my computer all day long, I don't so much mind as much of the inconvenience of like opening different tabs of a web browser. And so I'm sort of like warming up to Google too. But, I want to be optimistic that they're adding all these great features to Meet. But I don't know. They could just, decide to kill it one day or once things are...
Well, and they've had about 10 different video calling systems that, they had Hangouts, Meet, Allo, Duo. They've had a ton of different video calling systems that they have killed off. So I think Meet will probably stick around, but it'll be interesting to see just what they do with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be curious. I would love. It's one of the Google things that, like, I understand why all of the Google apps run in a web browser, but it's really one of the apps of theirs that I do wish that I had like a standalone Mac application,
standalone client for it. Yeah, absolutely.
Something like that. Yeah, I'm grateful you're able to Meet because, I've been a fan of all of the Rogue Amoeba apps that I have. When we went to an online learning model in March, there were a couple that I had been eyeing, and I went ahead and I grabbed. I think a couple of them are for sale in like something like a podcaster pack. I went ahead and grabbed whatever is like Farrago. Is it Farrago?
Farrago is our soundboard editor. Probably Loopback you started using maybe.
Loopback was the main attraction for me when we went online. Yeah. And then and I was already using SoundSource and Audio Hijack for various odds and ends. And it struck me as like I've always been using Audio Hijack for making practice resources and stripping content out of apps that it's locked down to and sort of repurposing it in education scenarios. But then when I needed a way to have a little bit better control of what my students were hearing on the end of a Google Meet call, Loopback kind of became this thing. And I don't know how much of a temperature you sort of have to like what professions outside of, what, I don't know how much you're aware of like what vast variety of professions are, if you've ever heard from a music educator before, but like there is definite buzz about this category of software that Loopback falls into in like the music teacher Facebook groups and, on Twitter, there's a handful of people who are looking to solve these problems. So anyway, I've been using it a lot. I blogged a bit about a couple of different Rogue Amoeba apps over the past 6 months, and I thought, why don't I just chat with you about what you all are doing for a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so yeah, to answer, you sort of had a question in there that we've definitely been hearing this year in 2020 from more educators, people doing online learning, whether it's not just, teachers directly, but also people doing things in businesses where you're doing remote training sessions. And so Loopback in particular this year has seen a huge increase in usage for exactly that, where you're trying to route audio into some sort of meeting so that you can control exactly what the other parties are hearing. In person, you might just, play that audio out of your computer and it's plugged into a speaker system or whatever. But when you are doing it remotely, it can get a lot trickier, and Loopback really helps make that possible. So that's something where this year we have really seen a whole lot of new usage of Loopback that's been really, really fun to see and really interesting to see and sort of guided us as far as how we want to promote it and maybe in the future what sort of additional features we want to put in there.
Yeah, that's interesting. So for me, in a music teacher who might not know, and I'll link, I guess, in the show notes to this episode, my Loopback post. But what this problem for me is solving is like we are trying to we're trying to model quality music as best as we can for our students. And Google Meet, as an example, does allow you to share a tab of a Chrome browser.
Right.
So you could like pump a YouTube video through there, and it works okay. But what Loopback allows me to do is basically combine my external microphone and then a handful of music apps that I play all the time, and then just turn those all into one input that I select in the Google Meet as like this is my input. So anything output that comes from any of those apps,
right, absolutely.
And my microphone, just pump that straight through the call. And from tons of testing with other music teachers in my district and with students, I mean, this is the best quality audio experience that I have been able to get, which is really great, because we're not only are we modeling, I tell a trumpet player, like, here's what a good sounding trumpet sounds like. Well, here's the best possible way for me to transmit this audio to you is through this direct connection here. And then not to mention, of course, the ability to, like, we do a lot of, I'm teaching band. I don't know if I mentioned that in my email, but, I'm trying to have them play as much as possible. Well, we can't all play on mic, but I can make a lot of play along material where they are at least, engaging with their instrument as much of that 45 minutes a day as possible. And this has absolutely been a great tool. Like, I've got, like a music app library of like play along tracks synced up. I've got my Google Chrome. I even have like my Logic. I have like a kind of like a digital rack of like software instruments that are all open. Like, here's what a marimba, here's a trumpet, here's a basic sine wave that I can play on any note. And then Logic is routing through the call too. So I've got all of this hardware and software in my studio, and all of it is just funneling through Loopback straight to the Google Meet. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it's like I said, it's been really interesting to hear about these use cases, and it's gratifying for us to hear, how much we're helping in a time when everyone is trying to figure this out. Everyone's trying to figure everything out, right? Everyone who has a job that has changed is trying to figure out the best way to do it, and if our tools can help you and other people like you do that, that's obviously something we're happy about.
Yeah, I'm curious, and if you're not at liberty to talk about this, that's understandable. But like, what are like the features that you feel like might sort of tailor themselves towards not necessarily this situation, or maybe what you've learned from this situation in the future of Loopback?
Well, so I think the biggest thing is we've in the middle of the year. So in the U.S. the pandemic started in about March, and in March and April we saw a big spike in terms of usage and sales, and all sorts of people coming to, especially Loopback, but really all of our tools. And so we said, all right, what exactly is happening? We know people are working from home. We know people are working remotely, whatever. But, how are they using these tools? And we sort of talked to our users and sort of boiled this down to, we've got 5 or 6 new use cases that we haven't really discussed before. And one of those is adding audio to a VoIP call. So like what you're doing, adding music to your Google Meet. That's something that Loopback can help with. People wanted to clean up audio that they were receiving. So if someone is on a call and doesn't necessarily have a great sound environment, doesn't have a great microphone, the person on the other end receiving that can actually improve that audio at least somewhat. You're always better off improving it at the source, but if you get lower quality audio, you can still make it sound a little bit better on your end, and people are doing that with SoundSource. So we had these half dozen maybe major new use cases, and we wrote about a bunch of them. And the biggest thing we saw was people using multiple tools that we create, Loopback, Audio Hijack, SoundSource, and sort of chaining them together, which is great. Obviously, we're happy if people are able to make use of multiple products that we sell. But in some cases, it's not necessarily the most straightforward thing to do. So a good example of that is if you want to clean up your own microphone before you send it into Google Meet or Zoom, whatever VoIP app you're using, then you're going to use Audio Hijack to capture the microphone, apply audio effects to it, and then use Loopback to route that audio into the VoIP app. Well, the thing that we're at least looking at, nothing has been decided here, but what that brought to mind was, hey, maybe we don't need to use Audio Hijack in that equation if Loopback itself was able to improve the quality of audio and apply those effects within Loopback. If you had that ability just in Loopback, then you only need to use one application to improve your microphone. So that's probably the one that came up the most, is people looking to improve their own inputs And right now that takes two different applications, and you can do it, and we have a tutorial on how to do it. But if we can make that simpler for people, that's certainly something we want to do.
Yeah, that's an interesting answer, because I do already, to some extent, feel like some of these applications do very, very successfully like kind of cover the same ground as one another in a way that makes them so much more flexible for me. Because there are times where, I would use, in fact, Audio Hijack was the one application that I would tell other teachers about the most. But now that, some of the, like, I wasn't like super power using it. So things like SoundSource can cover some of those minor things like you mentioned. And for if no one, I have a post on SoundSource that I'll link in the show notes. But for those who don't know, SoundSource basically replaces the little, at least I consider it to be like a super powerful version of like the little menu bar icon to control the sound settings of your Mac. But what's great about it is, it's like souped up like with individual volume, like a mixer for all of the volume output of your apps. And this is just so critical to be able to have mapped to mine is like option something S or something is like, we'll just pop it up on screen. And, I'm listening to xylophone and glockenspiel on some of these Zoom calls, and to just be able to like turn down the audio output of the Zoom call is super useful, like a little keyboard shortcut away. But then on the other end, and this is like my extreme selling point to music teachers who are also like nerds and power users, is I actually was streaming a play along track to a student. I wanted him to, it's like he was playing like an orchestral snare drum piece where, the recording, we were listening to lots of different recordings of different interpretations of how this part of this piece was supposed to be played. And one of the recordings that had a particularly good tempo was from like the 20s. It was like so old, had like that characteristic crackle.
Right.
And I was like, I wonder if I can...
Yeah,
exactly, yeah. And I was like, I wonder if I can just take the output of just that app. It was Adagio, which is like a streaming classical music service. Well, I was able in SoundSource to just take that one app and then apply, I have like an isotope restoration plugin that kills a little bit of that crackling sound.
Yep, absolutely.
And then streamed it straight through Loopback to the call, and it worked brilliantly. And that was just like a one tap button to get that menu up on my screen. I wasn't digging through like the settings of Logic or Zoom or anything like that.
Yeah, so you touched on something. So sometimes we get users who say, all these apps seem to do the same thing. What do I need? And then ideally, obviously, we always tell them we have free trials, download these things, and they don't really do the same thing. I mean, we have 7 products, and there is definite overlap in some of what they do. But what you just mentioned is one where there's a fair amount of overlap, that SoundSource can apply audio effects to any output on your computer, and Audio Hijack can also do that. Audio Hijack is a tool that we built for recording audio and incidentally added the ability to add audio effects to it. SoundSource is really designed from the ground up to enable you to apply effects to something. So exactly what you just did, where you're playing audio and you want it to sound a little bit better, in this case so that someone else can hear it, but even if just you want to hear it, SoundSource is something that should always be running, sits in your menu bar. Like you said, you can hit a keyboard shortcut or you just click it in the menu bar, throw an effect or two on there, and suddenly your audio sounds better. And it's designed to just be as quick as possible and make it as easy as possible to do that. So that's one where there definitely is some overlap with functionality with Audio Hijack, but it's more about what the intended use case is. And so that's great to hear that worked so well for you. And that's when we set out to add audio effects to audio on your computer, we said, all right, how can we make this as easy as possible and make it doable for anybody? And obviously you're a pretty advanced user, but I think it's easy enough that almost anyone can do it. And to hear that that's exactly what happened is always good.
For a teacher who is, thinking about like, okay, well, where do I start? I mean, I guess you sort of answered the question. Do you just recommend that they go download all the free trials and see, like if a teacher said, what's one application that I download and install?
Right. So no, our answer is not, hey, just download everything and figure it out. No, we certainly want to help people, but I'm sort of laughing at the question that I get sometimes, which is just, what do I need? And it's right. The answer is, I'm not sure. You need to tell us a little more about what you're trying to do. Mm-hmm. In terms of what is useful to teachers, my initial answer, especially in 2019 and earlier, would have been Audio Hijack. Yeah. Audio Hijack is sort of, I can say it at least on a podcast, we think of it as like a Swiss Army knife for audio. So you can use it to record audio, you can use it to apply effects to audio, and you don't have to record at the same time. You can use it to broadcast audio. So if you want to send audio to an MP3 streaming server, or more recently to YouTube Live, Facebook Live, things like that, It will enable you to do a whole lot of different things with audio on your Mac and share that audio as well. In 2020, I would say that Loopback may well be, obviously you found it to be tremendously useful, it may well be the tool that is most useful in terms of remote learning, in terms of routing audio around your computer and routing audio to something like a Google Meet, where you want to control exactly what is heard over there. And then the third of our 7 products, the third one that I would suggest is, we've already talked about, SoundSource. SoundSource is designed to be sort of audio control on your Mac that is better than anything that you've had before. And you know, we refer to it as sound control so good it should be built into the OS. And we really mean that this now, when you use SoundSource, you hopefully don't have to open the sound control panel. You don't have to open the volume menu in the menu bar. SoundSource takes care of what those have done in the past and does a whole lot more on top of that. So those are like the 3 tools that I would suggest someone look at. In terms of the financial aspect of it, it's certainly something where we see a lot of school districts that are doing volume purchasing, where we have discounts, and we always have an academic discount specifically to help out teachers and students who may need to use this. So it's something where this is something, you mentioned the idea of having room to make quality software. And that's something that we have been doing for 18 years now. Our focus has been making a good product and then hoping that it finds an audience, as opposed to finding an audience and just making a product that, you know, barely suits their needs. So it's something where we don't have, you know, bargain basement prices. We're talking about SoundSource is $40, Audio Hijack is $60, Loopback is $100. But again, we have these academic discounts, we have volume licensing. So it's something where hopefully this is useful enough, and hopefully it's something that is solving a problem enough that it is worth purchasing, obviously.
Yeah, sure. And that's exactly why I talk about these things. You know, so much of teaching is, you know, right now is there's certainly a lot of stress happening. And, you know, I try to explain to people, like, sometimes the way you go about doing something is actually just as important as, like, what actually you're doing on your computer. And this gets thrown out a lot because one of the other sort of discussions in our music education space is a lot of people make these virtual ensemble videos where you gather all this asynchronous video of kids playing different parts of various different, you know, like a concert band or an orchestra piece or something. And then you edit it together, and there's so much discussion of, like, well, what's the free way to do it? And it's like, well, sure, you can use WeVideo, but then, like, you're not going to be able to, like, have control to, like, the sample level of, like, how much you nudge the video. So if you're trying to line up 2 very percussive sounding instruments, good luck. And good luck if you lose your data or the tab crashes on you, you know.
Right, absolutely.
So yeah, you know, I advocate for that good experience. Teachers, you know, who are able to certainly add a little bit of ease and flexibility into their technological workflow, you know, I recommend it.
Well, and it's something where, you know, you spend a little bit of money up front, and our software is all, you pay for it once and it works, and it's not a subscription, it's nothing like that. And I think of it almost similar to being a Mac user in general, where the upfront cost on a Mac is generally higher than you can get a much cheaper PC than you can get a Mac. But long term, your enjoyment and how you use it is going to pay dividends on that original purchase. And hopefully it's a similar thing here, where you spend a little bit of money up front, but now your life has gotten easier, things work better. And, you know, certainly we've seen that for enough of an audience, that is well worth paying for.
Sure. No, absolutely. Let me bounce back for a second. You mentioned Audio Hijack as maybe, like, before 2020 being the one program you'd recommend. I use Audio Hijack for so much, but I mostly, like, 95% of the time, use it to get to record the audio from another application. And I know Piezo, I believe this is kind of like its primary function. Like, it doesn't have quite all of the extra features, but you know, so if someone were looking for just to do that, I mean, just this one program alone, in an age where we have to make more and create more resources for students, this is definitely these 2 apps are the 2 that I recommend for just this, like, active, like, okay, you need to get, you know, a YouTube video or, like, a sample of a song in a library that's locked down into a project. And by the way, before anyone listening emails me about copyright, I just there's such thing as fair use. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Fair use is a very important phrase for us, and it's interesting because we've been, like I said, we've been doing this for 18 years. Very early on, 2002, 2003, when we started, we would frequently get emails that said, is this legal? Is this allowed? And I literally, did a little bit of a law school education for myself to be able to point out, here's what fair use is, and here's what time shifting is, and here's why this is allowed. And you can make a sample and use it for educational purposes or use it for your own use. And there's things you can do and things you can't do. But certainly these tools enable you to do tons of things that are legal and perfectly, ethical as well, is a good point as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's just such a huge use for that. Speaking of, making an experience just a little nicer, I mean, even something as simple as, well, I don't want to have 8 million tabs open. I want to take a little sample I'm going to teach on of an orchestral piece or something that's on YouTube. I just want to take a 4-minute sample of that and embed it in one of my slides so that I don't have to switch around my flow, something as simple as that. Now, speaking of blasting lots of rapid fire audio through to a class, this is where Farrago became super useful to me. And yeah, so what I've done is, and I did a project back in the fall that I talked a little bit about on the last episode. For anyone who cares, I did some scale exercise play along tracks that I made and produced. Put enough time into it that I ended up deciding to launch. It's easy enough on Squarespace to launch a store, so I put them up on a store. Yeah, it's like a practice resource for young instrumentalists. It's a bunch of scale patterns that have beats under them to, so that metronome is not as fun as a beat and a tuning note. So I launched these, and I needed a way in class because typically in a teaching environment, I've got a bunch of things I want to do in a routine. And so while I don't know if Farrago is certainly the way that most people use it, what I've done is I've just taken a ton of these short recorded exercise play-alongs, and I've aligned them in a grid, because all you have to do is just drag them from your desktop or your music app straight into a square, like a grid of squares, and then you instantly have a soundboard.
Yeah, so Farrago is one that we made when we heard from podcasters and people doing live events. It was clear that this was something that would be sort of a companion to some of our other tools. And people need a soundboard app. People need a way to quickly play rapid fire audio. So it's interesting. Let me ask you a question. When you're playing these things, do you have them sequenced? Do you know ahead of time, I'm going to play this and then this and then this? Or is it something where you need to be able to say, oh, I need that one. Now I need this one. And you don't know up front what you're going to play?
Sometimes a little bit of both. It's for that second category, which is why I like to have a bunch of them. We do the same thing often enough that I could string a bunch together into one audio file, and then just for the first 10 minutes of class, drink coffee and watch them toot along. So, but no, it's typically I try to give them performance feedback in between. So it's lots of little bits.
Sure. Well, no, I asked because earlier I was actually it's midway through December, and I was recently looking at what we had done in 2020, what Rogue Amoeba had done in 2020. And one of our big updates was Farrago 1.5, which included a whole bunch of updates to the list view of Farrago. So you're describing the grid view, where you can just play an arbitrary sound and you can replay it, whatever. The list view is sort of designed for, a great example is if you're putting on a play and I need this sound effect, and then I need this narration above to play next, and then I'm going to need these 3 sound effects in a row. Every time you do the play, it's going to be in that same sequence. So the list view is designed to play things in sequential order. So I'm just interested to know if that would be more useful than the grid view in terms of how you use it.
Yeah, things are consistent enough from day to day that I probably should be using that side of things.
They both work. They both provide you with exactly what you're talking about. Just press one key and play the audio. But it's something where we're sort of trying to feel out how this is used and how we're always trying to feel out how our products are used and how we can improve them. So it's always good to talk to somebody who's making use of it, daily or weekly.
Well, you just hit a good one that I didn't even think to mention. But yeah, there are plenty of people who listen to this who, actually run, musical theater productions at their high schools.
Right.
And yeah, this is totally a tool for that as well. So here's another popular thing that I'm hearing about from some of my music ed tech friends is it's just a question for you. I'm not sure. I haven't been keeping up to date with the fine print on the updates of that program. Is there a way to do the Stream Deck, to have the Stream Deck? Because I've got it linked through Keyboard Maestro. I'm not sure that's the most direct way to launch.
In terms of triggering in Farrago, you mean?
Yeah, I'm wondering is there a way if I can have Google Meet, the Chrome is the app that's in the foreground, and then I hit a button on a Stream Deck, and then in the background, one of my little samples triggers off.
Right. So there's two things here. When we initially built Farrago has an 80. The grid can be up to 80 tiles, and you can have multiple grids. But the idea is that you're going to use your keyboard as the input device. So Farrago needs to be in the foreground, and you'll press, say, the Q key, and it'll play a car crash noise or whatever audio effect you need. So when Farrago's in the background, obviously it can't take those keyboard shortcuts. So Farrago has a built-in global keyboard shortcut that you can set, similar to what you mentioned with SoundSource, where you press one keyboard shortcut, Farrago jumps forward, then you press the single, one key and it'll play, and then you can jump back to Google Meet. Obviously, if you just want to keep it in the background all the time, that won't work. So the other thing that we've built is Midi support. So really, the answer to your question is that some sort of MIDI input is what we recommend, and certainly what we've used for this, where you have a MIDI keyboard where every key is tied to one of these samples or audio effects or whatever you're looking for. So in terms of there's various devices out there, and the MIDI standard is what we're focused on right now, but there are other ones that we're certainly looking at supporting in the future.
Yeah, the Stream Deck you can, I believe, use it with that MIDI standard.
So
I got to look into that. There's probably a more direct way to do it than what I'm doing, which is with Keyboard Maestro. For those who don't know, Stream Deck is a really, really awesome little device. It's just a grid of physical squares that you can program to do neat things on your computer. Yeah,
that's a good definition, a good explanation of what it is, exactly. Yeah.
I don't know how else
I've got one sitting in a closet somewhere. I haven't used it lately. But.
Well, what sold me on it is I started using OBS to have a little bit quicker control of what's on screen in my classes. And that's cool software. I'm amazed that that's that is free. I don't know enough about it. It's such a new exploration for me. I don't know a ton about its development, but I'm using just like whatever is the standard one, not like Streamlabs or any of the other.
Right. No, just the standard OBS. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's pretty good. I mean, the Stream Deck it's nice. It was a little bit of a treat yourself moment, but just to be able to change my camera angle or like pop my screen up, without fiddling in menus and Zoom is kind of nice. Yeah, Stream Deck, very cool thing. Teachers, check it out. I guess so. Y'all have other apps. These are the ones that I feel like have the most immediate problems that most teachers would recognize. But I want to just say, like, Fission has been. I've set it to be the default for like most audio file types on my computer.
Oh, awesome!
Just Absolutely. Because like it does this thing that I'm trying to do always, where I'm like trying to just take an audio file and I just want to like trim it and then like export it in as few steps as possible.
As few steps as possible, absolutely. Yeah. So Fission is, as you've implied, obviously it's our audio editor. So I mentioned early on that, we listen to what people are telling us and it guides our development. And our very first product was Audio Hijack. And geez, my timeline is screwy at this point. But basically, from Audio Hijack, people were able to record files, and then they said, "Oh, I need to edit this file. I recorded longer than I needed, and I want to trim off the ends, or I want to split it into multiple files, or all sorts of different reasons why you would edit a file after the fact." And Audio Hijack didn't do that, so we said, "All right, let's look at making an audio editor." And there are plenty of audio editors on the Mac. Most of our products are sort of the only one in their area. There's not a lot of tools to record audio from other applications on the Mac. Audio Hijack has some secret sauce that is pretty difficult to replicate, and that makes it sort of stand alone. But audio editing is something that is pretty well understood, and there's Audacity, which is a free audio editor, and Apple has a couple different editors that you can pay a decent amount of money for, or GarageBand is free. So Fission was designed to be sort of a companion to Audio Hijack, and our goal when we made it was to make it as simple as possible to do exactly what you're describing. Just open a file, I need to trim off the end, say, and I need to split it into two files so that I have file 1 and file 2, and you can do it in Fission when you get good at it, in literally like 30 seconds you can do all that. And what's really funny about it is that I'll be interested to know let me ask you, is there anything Fission doesn't do that you would like it to do?
Well, it's basically just like faster QuickTime for me right now. I should probably use it to explore some more of the features before I'm equipped to answer that question. I mean, it's just like solving this problem of like, oh man, I did like a concert recording and I exported the file from Logic, but like I left 30 seconds of silence on the end.
Yep, exactly. So I ask because what we hear from a lot of people, so our goal was making a very simple editor and making it easy to use and quick to use. But what we hear from a lot of people is, oh, Fission is great. I love it. It's so quick. It's so easy. I just wish it did this one other thing. And the problem is that one other thing is 50 different things. So
Right.
we hear from 50 different people, and it's 50 different things. And as soon as we add even 10 or 20 of those things, it's no longer easy. It's no longer fast. So it's been this battle we've had for Fission is almost 15 years old now. We've been developing it for almost 15 years, and we've had this battle of, obviously we want to add new functionality that's going to help a substantial number of people, but we don't want to add every arcane feature that 3 users are going to use, because every time you do that, it adds some amount of cognitive load to using the application, and it's going to slow things down for everybody. So it's interesting you've definitely got it to the point where it's quick, it does what you need, and that's it. And that's certainly what we're going for. There are certainly people who can use a much more fully featured editor, and Fission just isn't that for them, and they can graduate from it, or they can use this when they need something quick, and they can use a higher end editor when they need more functionality.
Right. Yeah, this is an ongoing thesis of this show. I will pay for something to take the technology just put it out of my way and let me get to the content that I'm trying to teach. Like, I teach music. Like, I don't want to think about buttons or knobs. Like, if I could,
Right.
I would see the waveform and like trim it with see the end of where the audio stops, and then it would just be that would be the file on my computer.
Right.
So whatever is going to get me there. I have this weird problem with QuickTime where I never quite understand what it's doing with like file duplication and saving. I know that I should probably understand it, but for some reason when I like duplicate a file or like trim a file, the way that it like tries to like save it as a new copy.
Save a new copy, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's like a little bit backwards to me. Anyway, I don't know. It's a good tool. I probably would have never tried Fission if it wasn't for the podcaster pack, but I'm so glad that I did, because again, like when you just that basic of like managing and manipulating audio files that are just scattered across your hard drive is a little lighter because of it.
Yeah, so that's it's called the Ultimate Podcast Bundle, and it's Audio Hijack, Loopback, Fission, and Farrago. And it's tools that, if you're a podcaster or even really just somebody working with audio, you may find a use for all 4 of these tools. You may find a use for 2 or 3 of them, and then later say, oh, you know what? I have that easy audio editor. Let me try that. Or I have that soundboard app, and now suddenly I'm doing, a performance where I want a soundboard. So it's something where we bundled those together, and obviously there's a discounted price for purchasing them all together, and hopefully people find some uses for things that they didn't necessarily know that they would use.
Yeah, always a delight when that happens, for sure. Yeah, so I'm curious. I'm gonna, just because I don't know what about your background, like what sort of led you on this path of like specifically audio apps that solve the problems that your offerings do? Like, what was the impetus for that?
Right, absolutely. So I always tell people we really sort of fell into this. Rogue Amoeba did not set out to be an audio utility company for the Mac. The 3 co-founders, myself, Alex Lagutin, and Quentin Carnicelli, we all came from in the late 90s when MP3 was just taking off. We were working on various MP3 players on the Mac. And that was a very small community, and there were plenty of users enjoying these applications, but the development community was very small, and so we knew each other. And Alex had the idea for Audio Hijack to capture audio from other applications. At the time, to tell you just how far back this was something where people wanted to record real player streams so that they could listen to them later. I imagine the company Real still exists under somebody's label, but the real player streams are not a thing anymore. But audio streams certainly still are. And so the tool that we created that let you record audio streams is still useful. So that's sort of where it all got started for us was with Audio Hijack. And we made Audio Hijack and we put it out there, and people said, okay, I want to add an equalizer to DVD player. So there's another thing people aren't doing. They're not watching DVDs on their Macs anymore.
Right.
But people still watch movies on their Macs, and most movie players don't have audio effects built in. And even something as simple as an equalizer can improve the sound quality of your movie that you're watching. So if you're on a laptop on a plane and you say, oh, I want to amp up the volume and I want to adjust the EQ, Audio Hijack can still let you do that. And that's something where almost 20 years ago, people were interested to do that, and it's still useful. So like I said, Audio Hijack is the first tool we made, and we had a couple different use cases for it. And those use cases sort of proliferated over time where people said, okay, now I want to record a podcast. Now I want to record a Skype interview. Help me do that. And that influenced the features we added. And then from there, where we became sort of an audio software company is people said, as I said earlier, hey, I need to edit a file. Can you help me do that? And we said, all right, let's set out to make an audio editor. And one we haven't talked about, and you know, we don't need to get deep into it, but we have a tool called Airfoil, which lets you stream audio all around your house. And people had Apple TVs and Airport Expresses and now HomePods and devices like that, where they said, hey, I want to send audio to these devices from my Mac, and it wasn't possible at the time. And we said, all right, we have this technology that Audio Hijack is built on that lets you capture audio from any app on your Mac. That's sort of, as I mentioned, the secret sauce of Audio Hijack and of most of our applications is the ability to grab audio from any application on your Mac and then do something with it. So Audio Hijack lets you record it or add effects to it. Airfoil lets you stream that audio around your house. Loopback lets you route that audio from one application to another, so that if you want to send audio into a VoIP call, something like that. Basically, the ability to capture that audio opened up all these possibilities for us, and listening to what users were looking to do led us to say, okay, in some cases, we're going to add that as a feature to Audio Hijack. So I mentioned broadcasting to YouTube Live. That's something that's just built into Audio Hijack. We haven't made a separate application for that, at least up to this point, because it's a use case where we know there are people that need it, but it's not something that we want to make a focal point. And then something like routing audio between applications, it was clear to us that Audio Hijack could have been made to do that, but making it a separate application was going to be easier for everybody to understand, and obviously also beneficial to us in terms of if we can sell two different applications to someone instead of just selling one, that's good for us as a business. But that's certainly not the only consideration. But yeah, so to bring this all back around, it's something where we fell into it with Audio Hijack, and then people said, oh, I need to do this thing that's sort of related to that. And we said, okay, we have some of that technology and we can build more of that technology. And to the point where 18 years later, we have a stable of 7 different audio-related products that at this point, certainly after 5 or 10 years, people started to say, okay, I need to do something with audio. What does Rogue Amoeba have? I bet they have a tool for that. And either we did or, you know, we heard from enough people that we said, all right, let's build that functionality. So it's not something where we said, all right, we love music. We want to create music apps. Let's make audio utilities. I think everyone at the company enjoys, you know, music, listening to music. We have some people who play music, but it's not something necessarily that you'd expect where just everyone was deep into music. It's a little more coincidental than that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Something you said in that story made me think, you know, I was in a Twitter conversation with a music theory teacher the other day about like just their pure hatred of the music app across all of Apple's offerings. And it makes me think sometimes I get these like crazy pipe dreams and people just kind of diffuse me who are like a little bit savvier than myself. But I'm just going to bring it up because it's been a couple years since I've in a public way expressed my pipe dream for it. You know, it would be really, really cool. I would pay a lot of money for some sort of music app. Speaking about the Apple Music app, some sort of alternative that was like designed for people like myself who, without dragging and dropping tons of audio files around their computer and making duplicate copies and doing editing and separate apps, something that would just allow me to, almost something like, you know, in the Photos app, you can like just swipe through all of your pictures of your kid, but then you can like edit it, and then all of a sudden you can like trim the edges off of it. You can apply like a filter, something like that, but for my music library that, you know, allows me to sort of like trim the end of a song or apply a certain kind of audio effect to it. I don't know. There's money in that idea somewhere. I would like to believe.
Well, so that's interesting because you just framed it in a way that I've not heard before. I've definitely heard plenty of people say they don't like the music player, formerly iTunes, now music.app. And they say, you know, why don't you guys make a music player? And the biggest issue is that music is free on the Mac and it comes shipped on every Mac. So competing with Apple's own free offering is a difficult thing to do. It's not impossible, but it's difficult. But you framed it as sort of photos for music, and that's an interesting take on it. That's a little bit different than, because you don't generally use photos to like look at your photos all the time. It's more you're using photos and you happen to look at some photos, but I don't think most people use it as sort of a photo album app the way that music is a music playing app. So there definitely is I can see a philosophical way of doing this that differs from the way Apple's music player does. But what I don't know is if there's a business case to be made for it. So you said there's money there. I don't know that there's money there. I absolutely agree with you that there is a better way to do it and a different way to do it.
Yeah, you're
but it's a
absolutely
question
right.
of will people pay for it?
Sure, and I don't think that enough people would want exactly what I'm describing, that they would realistically pay for it. But it's just something I've thought of because, the photos, I think about it now too because my wife was like going through old photographs on an old Mac where she's got like this aperture library of stuff that she's never moved over to Photos, and she's looking through it, and the computer is like so ancient, it's like dragging every time she scrolls. We wait 5 seconds for anything to happen on screen, but we're sitting there just looking at it, and we're like, you know what though, man, aperture is really nice. We like that app. Too bad there's nothing like that. And this is sort of a reoccurring thing I revisit, like sort of what applications are the good editing tools versus what are the ones, where does the finished product go? And I guess when you take, and not that many people who are professional photographers. Well, I guess I should say everyone uses the Photos app because everyone uses their camera on their phone. But there's people who need to do a little bit more editing and processing and library management, and maybe something like Adobe Lightroom first before they get the things they're happy with into that camera roll state. And I guess that's what I'm looking for is some sort of audio editor that has library management where all my audio is exposed to
all this audio. Yep.
Right, but those light editing tools that things so that I don't have to drag an MP3 out of a music player just to trim 30 seconds off the end and then re-add it and then delete the old copy. I don't know. So if someone's listening who has...
Well, it's certainly, it absolutely gives me something to think about in terms of, we have an editor. Should it have some management functionality built into it? Or, I mean, the obvious answer is that these are all basic files and files that are, universal, that work in multiple different applications. So the Finder is almost your library management tool for this. Obviously, that's not necessarily exactly what you want, but if you've got an audio file in one app, you can grab that file and toss it in another editor and tweak it and then take it back. So at the very least, you're able to do what you're looking to do, as opposed to having proprietary formats where you can't pass these things around. But in terms of making it easier and having some of that library management functionality built into some of these tools, it's at least something to think about. Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah, well, speaking of things that Apple and software developers can be doing better, I have some listener questions that all sort of fit this theme.
Okay.
So, yeah, a couple people who are actually past guests and friends of the show sent in some questions, and I think, let's see, which one of these? Yeah, I guess I'll just do these in order. So a lot of people were curious what do you think Apple should do with audio on the iPad? And are there any particular changes that would enable or inspire you to bring an application to that platform?
Oh man. I mean, this can be a very long answer, or I can try and shorten this.
Give the short one. I know you
Yeah.
have a time limit, so whatever the short version of that answer is, I guess.
Well, so I mean, I want to preface it by saying that the iPad itself is a very interesting device, and it's something that I would love to be more in love with. But the problems that I, as a business person, see with it are the ecosystem. So it's not anything with the hardware or even the software specifically, but it is very difficult to sell a tool for very much money on iOS, including on the iPad. The iPad sort of demands a deeper application than the iPhone, more of a Mac level, broad application, but you can't sell it for the $20 or $30 or $50 or even $100 that you can on the Mac. And there's various ways Apple can try to address that, and I'm not sure that it's entirely their fault, but the short version is that I think the ecosystem is not super friendly to the types of apps that we make on the Mac, which are deeper apps and apps that we build and then improve over time. When people are looking to spend 99 cents or $4.99 for an app, you need to sell a whole lot of copies to make up for that low price. So, I mean, the biggest thing is not necessarily, the OS itself doesn't handle audio, or it's really the ecosystem. But even if you solve the ecosystem problems, which I think they've been trying to do for almost 10 years now, the platform itself is much more locked down than the Mac, and you can only distribute software through the Mac, through the iOS App Store. And so you're limited in terms of what Apple will allow. So on the Mac, I mentioned earlier, we capture audio from any application that's playing audio on your Mac. We can grab that audio and then enable you to manipulate that audio. And as a user, that's great. That's, it gives you all sorts of flexibility and power. On the iPad, there's no way for us to do that. And even if we hacked some way to get that audio, we wouldn't be allowed to distribute the software in the iOS App Store because Apple would just say, oh, that's using private APIs, or that's, doing whatever thing that we're prohibiting. So for us, it's something where when these devices came out, when the iPhone came out and when the iPad came out, we looked at it, but the exclusive distribution that Apple requires through the App Store and the restrictions that they put on those apps, for us, has made these platforms almost a non-starter. We certainly tried a little bit on them and fought some battles on them and lost some battles on them and went back to the Mac, and the Mac is a much more open platform and a much more flexible platform. So I don't have a good answer. Apple just needs to fix audio in this one way, and then everything will be great, and you'll see a proliferation of great new audio apps. I think there's a lot of problems that are preventing that from being the case, even as people see, this is a much cheaper, $300, $400, $500 computer that has a touch screen and is great for all sorts of different things. But because of the way that ecosystem works and because of the way software distribution works, you're not seeing the tools that you would ideally see.
Yeah, that makes sense. The ecosystem angle is particularly interesting because you see this all across the board in audio software and in professional creative software. We have tons of programs that we would love to see in music education on iPadOS, thinking specifically about things like professional digital audio workstations, but also things like, there are a couple of big score, like music notation editing
absolutely.
programs. And these are programs that there's no real technical reason why they couldn't run on iPadOS at this point. It's just the fact of you have to take into account, okay, well, a lot of these sales are universities who fit an entire music technology lab with a score editor. They have no education pricing on the on the iOS App Store.
Right.
Things like that. There's no upgrade pricing, which when you're selling a $600 piece of software, that would be nice for your business to be able to offer.
Absolutely.
Yeah, interesting. Okay.
And that was the short answer, by the way. So that was still long, and that was my short answer. So sorry.
No, it's all good. I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, yeah. I just to say, I'm not 100% even sure how I would want to, in the current way that iPadOS is between app multitasking. I'm not even sure how I would want it to reveal more than one audio in and out that would be pleasing for me. So I certainly understand the challenge of the problem. Okay, I think this probably looks like my last major question. Every single person that I talk to who is familiar with Rogue Amoeba software asked this question in a way more colorful way than I'm going to phrase it. Why do makers of audio software vary so vastly in how long it takes them to upgrade for a new operating system? Why are some apps, you have apps that were just day one with the new Macs with the M1 chip and the Big Sur update, just ready to go. And then software plugins that are out there and makers of I won't mention any names, but certainly some of these digital audio workstation programs, months and months and months and months and months. And then maybe right as soon as the next OS update is going to come out, finally they fix the old one.
Supporting the previous one.
Right.
So I don't know that I have a good answer to this, or I don't know that I have a scientific answer, at least. I certainly can give you some theories. You mentioned that our stuff was available this year. It was available 3 days before Big Sur came out. And as soon as people had the M chip based Macs in their hands, we had public betas available. And now we have official releases of just about everything. So, very quickly we have moved to make this stuff available so that people, early adopters can make use of our tools and continue to make use of our tools. But that's something that is difficult to do. It's something that takes a lot of energy. It's something that's a grind. Personally, I wish that Apple would not release a new operating system every single year, because the work to support that new OS, the work to support the new M chip based Macs, that's going to pay dividends for 5, 10, 20 years. So that's fine. But the new OS every single year, it really feels like treading water to keep up with that. And as a developer, as a business person, it's not a lot of fun. It's not enjoyable to say, okay, just to stay where we are, just to stay in place, we need to do weeks or months worth of work. And ultimately for customers, it's not great, because that time could instead be spent building new features, building new functionality. So it's something where personally I wish Apple would say, you know what, we don't need a new OS on the Mac every year, maybe every 18 months, maybe every 2 years, and give people a little bit more time, give developers a little bit more time to update their tools and not have to spend so much time building for this. But in terms of why there's such a disparity, I think part of it is probably due to the user bases of these various products. So if you've got a production tool where where a good chunk of your user base is using the software to make money directly. So if you run a music studio and you've got things working and let's just say you've got bands coming in to record their album, you don't want to change anything. It doesn't make any sense to change anything. Everything is working as it is. And okay, Apple has a new OS and it's got some great new features, but everything that you need is currently working. So you're not going to update your OS that quickly. And therefore, you're not going to need a new version of your digital audio workstation or this audio plugin that you're using, whatever. So I think a big part of it is that if you have a lot of professional users, they're going to be lagging in terms of updating. Rogue Amoeba has a good number of professional users and a good number of prosumer users, people that are hobbyists who maybe make a little bit of money off this, podcasters who, if they have ads, they make a little bit of money, but it's not their primary source of income, things like that. But we also have a whole lot of consumer users who, I use the phrase, they upgrade first and ask questions later. So if you've upgraded your Mac and then you realize, oh, heck, the tool that I used, Audio Hijack or Sound Source, whatever, isn't yet compatible, we're going to hear about it. And obviously that's not an enjoyable time for us. So it's something where for us, it's worthwhile to get these things working, before day one even. Whereas I think for companies that are making tools for professionals, maybe they don't hear about it quite as much. And so they can give themselves more time to support that new OS. That's what I would guess is driving a lot of it. There's certainly other less charitable answers one could give, but I think that's probably a charitable answer to it.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. And fair and understandable for sure. Well, we've been talking about software this whole time. We might as well just continue that. I mean, do you have any apps or utilities that are app of the week worthy to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I thought of this, the word app has come to mean an iOS app, a phone app, but I want to talk about a Mac app because that's where I spend most of my time. So I recently, probably sometime in the past 6 or 9 months, started using an app called Tot, T-O-T. And the website for it is Totrocks, tot.rocks, which is a funny domain name.
I didn't realize that was
know
the
there
domain.
was a rocks TLD. But so Tot is a synced note-taking system. So it's designed for really simple notes, and we're talking written notes, not musical notes. So if I need to write down a phone number and a name, so I get a voicemail and it says, "Oh, call back Patricia at this number," I'll type it into Tot. And Tot syncs between multiple Macs and also my phone. There's a phone app. And it's basically just a super light way of keeping disposable notes in sync. So it's a super useful tool. You can download a free version on the Mac. And then this goes back to something we were just talking about. The iOS version is $20, which is a great price for an app. And it's what a whole lot of things on iOS should cost, but it's what very little on iOS does cost. But the idea is, if you really need to take these notes on the go, paying $20 is probably going to be worth it to you. So I don't know. It's from the Icon Factory, a company that made Twitterific, makes Twitterific, made all sorts of different icons that people have seen, but they have some apps. And I don't know how that pricing model is working out for them, but I'm at least interested in it as a business person to see, is that a sustainable way to price things? But it's a great tool for syncing notes.
Yeah, absolutely. Wait, you might have just mentioned this. Is the Mac version free? Is that their...
The Mac version is free. The iOS version is $20, if I recall.
Yeah, got it. Okay, yeah. I've definitely used the Mac version, and I will say that it sounds like the kind of thing where you would be compelled to buy the iOS version if the Mac version had a lot of utility to you first, and then you needed those notes.
Right, absolutely. So you can try it free, and if you only use it on the Mac, great. But if you find you want it on the phone, then purchase that copy.
The way I've explained this app to teachers are always the ones who have who still use the stickies. So many people use the stickies still. It drives me mad. It's like those don't go with you anywhere. Like, what if you need that in your pocket?
Yeah, exactly.
So, but I see it and I'm like, hey, if you just had one window floating on your screen and then you like swiped between the different ones, and then like that was just with you everywhere. That's how I explain to teachers.
No, that's a great summary of it. Absolutely, because it's not designed like the Notes app from Apple. I use the Notes app as well, but I use that for what I'd sort of think of as heavier notes, things that I want to keep for longer, or that are paragraphs worth of text. This is really just a phone number or a name, or just a snippet of text that I'm going to need in the next day or two, and then delete forever.
So for me, and this is holiday themed a little bit, at least on my mind for that reason. So I've been making one of these like the app. So the Apple Photos app used to be able to like let you use this nice interface to make like a book or a calendar, like absolutely. A photo book,
a physical printed photo book. Yeah.
Right. That you would send to someone. And, my mother tasked me with my aunt on her side of the family has been making one of these for our giant family for years and years and years. And my mom said, well, what if you like made one for our sort of smaller, like our offshoot? And I was like, sure, I'll give it a shot. So I've, there are no, this is not baked into the Photos app anymore. So I had to go searching for an app that is like acts as like a Photos extension. And while this is not my app pick of the week, I will say that what I landed with is Mimeo. I think it's Mimeo Photos, and it's actually pretty good. Like you interact with this application only within the Photos app, and it integrates any project you're working on right in the sidebar. And you just you take photos from your various different photo albums, and then you just drag and drop them on. Let's say you have a project like I do, which is like a calendar project. You just drag and drop photos onto it, and then they become accessible to you, and you can drag and drop them into the little squares in the calendar. It's really, it's a pretty nice solution. It feels like almost, the best you're going to find for something that feels like you're not leaving the Photos app to do.
Right.
But my actual app pick of the week is a program called Pixelmator, and specifically Pixelmator Pro, which is like a Photoshop kind of competitor. Like if you're someone who you need to do more advanced things with photos. Maybe Photoshop does not appeal to you for one reason or another. This is a crazy good app, and what I like about it, the feature I'm going to highlight is, yes, it does do a lot of things that Photoshop does with layers and restoration brushes and things. But what I like about it is a lot of the basic tool set is itself an Apple Photos extension. So if I'm looking at a photo in Apple Photos, if I'm looking at a photo in Apple Photos, and then I click the edit button, and then I click the whatever the little more button is that opens up third-party apps, you can actually get the entire tool set of Pixelmator Pro to show up on the sidebar of the Apple Photos app. And so you can just like write from within Photos. You don't even have to open Pixelmator. You can like if you want to clean like a squirrel out of the background of a photo of your family outside or something, And that's just crazy powerful and cool. Also an example of another pro Mac app that is, priced, I think, well. I hope it's working out for them. They were doing, I'm not sure, I'll certainly write it in the show notes of this episode if possible. They were running I think they were running like a 50% off deal on that.
I think, yeah, they've done, they're pretty big, and they've done all sorts of different, higher price, lower price. So it's been interesting to see that. If I can chime in here, I'd be remiss if I did not mention a Pixelmator competitor, since it's made by a friend of mine called Acorn. I don't know if you've ever used Acorn.
Oh yes, I love Acorn.
So I would kick myself because Gus Mueller is a friend of mine, so he makes a competitor to Pixelmator called Acorn that is also similarly worth checking out, although I cannot attest to it linking in with photos the way you're describing. So if you're looking for that photos integration, then that is something that Pixelmator does, and I don't know if Acorn does. But it's interesting because there's a whole lot of, you called it a Photoshop competitor, and it really is. Photoshop is that tool that is, I don't even know if you can buy it standalone now, but it's that hundreds of dollars tool that has every feature that everyone has ever requested. And these tools, Pixelmator and Acorn, are designed to be more what we were talking about with Fission, where it's easy to use and it doesn't necessarily have every single possible thing you might need, but it probably covers most of what you need. And so there's an interesting ecosystem of photo editors out there.
Yeah, and some of them feel that, and that's the thing I like about some of these options. You mentioned Acorn, Pixelmator, I feel this way about. Even Affinity Photo, I know that they have like a Windows version, but when I use even their Mac version, I don't know, they just designed it to look a little bit more like, like the toolbars look more similar.
It feels like a Mac app.
Exactly, yeah. So I appreciate that for sure. Awesome. So app of the week, our musical experience of the week, however you want to frame that.
Album of the week, you mean? Yeah. So I didn't check on this. Is this something where people have largely chosen a recent album, or basically my answer to this is going to be it's Foo Fighters' The Color and the Shape, which is an
yeah.
album from 97, I think. So we're talking a 20-plus-year-old album. It is not topical. It is not current in any way. So it is the album that jumps to mind for me that if somebody said, oh, you can literally have one album on a desert island, that is what I would pick. And I don't even know that it's like a great pick for that. I just know that it's a great album. There's no filler on it. Every single song is good. Several of the songs sound different. So there's, ebbs and flows on this album as opposed to just 10 dance songs in a row that you get on some albums. So yeah, I don't know what you're thinking as far as criteria go on this, but if I just have to say album of the week, that's it.
It's such an open category. I literally a recent week mentioned an album from the 40s. Yeah, a Cleveland Symphony Orchestra recording a couple episodes ago. So, yeah, gosh, did I really not? Well, I think what I should do. So in the last recording, I mentioned not an album but a playlist, which is NPR's top 50 albums of 2020. Which every year I have a tradition. I don't know how traditions form, but this is certainly one that kind of surprised me. I realized, hey, I've been doing this a couple years now, and I continue to do it. Which is to just take that list and turn it into an Apple Music playlist. So I make it and I promote it and I talk about it and share it with friends of mine, as pretty much as soon as I make it. But I am only myself working through the albums that are on it. So this will
because that's a couple days worth of music.
Oh yeah. Well, something like you said, an album can be 20 years of music if it's a good album. Right. So I'm just working my way. There's a lot of highlights, a lot of things that I really like, and they do a good job of being pretty eclectic. But I'm scrolling here to find the one.
Yeah, have you found one that was particularly interesting to you?
So I'm tempted to pick something that I had not heard before, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. This is like a pop album. It's by, gosh, what is the actual album? It's the first one on the list. It's by Charlie XCX, who is just absolutely not an artist who I knew about or would think about. I certainly, keep my ear to the ground and try to stay current, but I was just like floored with the production of this record. I don't know that this is a record that'll stick with me for 20 years like your pick, but I just can say like there's this aesthetic on this recording that is like this ultra crunchy, bassy kind of like where like almost every instrument, and I hesitate to say instrument because it's a lot of synthesized sounds going on in the production of this record, but like everything is just so incredibly aggressive and crunchy. It's just like a snack. It's just like eating like a bag of chips. I don't know. And like a snack, maybe that's an analogy. Maybe it won't stick with me for long, but it is a record. It's the first on the list, and it's got lots of catchy pop songs on it that you would it's not like it's breaking any sort of grounds melodically, but just the way it's produced, like if you're wearing the right set of headphones. Even I've got like my AirPods. I plugged in my AirPods and I turned it up like a little louder than I usually listen, and I was just like, wow, this is like such an interesting production. This is just such an interesting sound that they're going for. So
I'm looking this up. It's called How I'm Feeling Now, I think. Is that right?
That is the name of the record. Thank you. Why doesn't Apple Music show it to me when I'm scrolling through my playlist? I don't know.
So the genre on Wikipedia lists it as electropop, hyperpop, and experimental pop, all of which are not things that I would say like, yes, I'm going to go listen to some hyperpop. But at the same time, the way you've described it, it's like, yeah, I could turn that on and definitely I would see myself being interested in it. So that's a good one. I will check that out.
Yeah, I don't know that it's like background listening for your work, but I don't know what. It's just funny. It's just the kind of thing where like it's got a sound, and I appreciate when someone who is in this space takes a risk and has a sound.
And but of course, new a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, and there could be tons of pop artists that this is drawing influence from that are doing this already, but this is my encounter with it anyway. So that's funny. Hyperpop.
Hyperpop. Yeah, it's not a genre I've heard of, but I get it. The name makes sense to me.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, Paul, thanks so much for coming on the show today. I appreciate all of your wisdom on this subject, and certainly for explaining kind of the background of what you do with Rogue Amoeba and what all of your apps do and what kinds of problems they solve, and for just having a cool discussion about how these are useful in music education.
Well, thank you for having me. And as I said, it's always good to hear how people are using these things, because we didn't set out to make tools for music educators, but we have made tools that music educators find useful, and that's always good to hear about and learn about how those are being used and how we can improve them. Can I do a real quick plug for our website? Oh, for sure. That's sorry. I almost forgot. Where do people find you? Right. Well, so I always do this on podcasts because years ago we got a domain that people don't know how to spell Rogue and people don't know how to spell Amoeba. And if you Google for Rogue Amoeba, you'll find us. But we bought the domain macaudio.com, which is way easier to understand and encompasses exactly what we do. We do audio on the Mac. So if you check out macaudio.com, you can find all the tools we talked about and download the free trials of them.
Right on. I'm Robby Burns. Thanks for listening to Music Ed Tech Talk. You can find the show's page, show notes for this episode, and my blog at musicedtechtalk.com. You can subscribe to blog posts through an RSS app of your choice, and you can subscribe to the podcast in the podcast app of your choice. You can also now get blog posts delivered right into your email inbox once a week and a newsletter. Please rate and review the show in the podcast app of your choice. It absolutely helps. And it'll only take a second and a few taps. Word of mouth is helpful too, so please spread the word about the show. Learn more about my music and teaching career at robbyburns.com. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and SoundCloud at Robby Burns. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.